Quantitative research, from its root word quanti, which means the amount of or number of. Quantitative research deals with numerals and how it can describe a phenomenon or infer a relationship. Quantitative research is the go-to approach for scientific inquiry because of its ability to test hypotheses. The relationship of different factors that we see creates a clearer picture of what is happening around us. These factors can also be called variables, which are the basis for formulating and testing hypotheses. Variables are traits that numerically describe or give meaning to an object, phenomenon, or a group of people. These variables person test scores of a student or the speed of a car. Remember, variables are an important concept in research. They are the ones that are usually identified, examined, described, or correlated with answering a scientific inquiry. Characteristic of quantitative research. Quantitative research deals with numbers, and the following is a list of characteristics of quantitative research. Controllability to understand a specific relationship or phenomenon. Quantitative research should be in an environment where all variables are identified and can be controlled. Generalizability, it is from larger sample sizes that are based on as a representative of the population. Objectivity, the result of the data are observable and measurable using structured instrument. Applicability, the research study should be replicable by other teams of researchers that will eventually come up with similar outcomes. Strength of quantitative research. The factual quality of quantitative research is and its generalizability to a population becomes the basis of its strengths. Queiroz, Faria, and Almeida 2017, who are researchers from Portugal, published a paper evaluating the strength and limitation of qualitative and quantitative research approaches. In this subsection, we are going to list down briefly describe each of the strength and quantitative research. Analysis of data is assisted with statistical method. These are mathematical tools in which numbers can be processed to become more meaningful. Simple statistical measures such as determining the mean, median, and mode of data set can also assist the researcher in reducing the book of data to make it easier to understand. Analysis using statistics also provides unbiased results. Large scale research can be undertaken due to many data collection methods that can be employed in quantitative research that are relatively easy to administer. A research with a large number of samples is possible. This also allows researchers to make a more comprehensive and generalizable conclusion for the entire population. Data can be represented in graphical or tabular form. Other statistical analysis researchers can analyze data using graphical or tabular representation. Numerical data summarized in tabular or graphical from aid researchers in making sense of them better. Weakness of quantitative research. The following describe the weakness of quantitative research. A large sample size requires a lot of time and effort. The goal to generalize the result of quantitative studies requires a larger sample size, which can be an issue for many researchers. This requirement increases the cost of research and its time frame becomes longer. Statistical analysis of data requires an expert to perform poor knowledge or indicate scales in statistics might negatively affect and the outcomes of a study. Quantifying and reducing observation to just pieces of numerical values makes it too simplistic. Numerical values can only answer the question of what, and it is often difficult to use these values in answering the whys and the hows of the phenomenon. Type of quantitative research. Quantitative research can generally be categorized into two experimental and non-experimental types. These two types are used by researcher depending on the topic and the nature of the problem that is being investigated. Descriptive research. Descriptive quantitative research is an example of a non-experimental research design. The focus of this research design is to describe factors, variables, or phenomena that occur in nature. For example, you want to identify the factors that contribute to the spoilage of food. We know that there might be 1,000 reasons why food spoils, but the best way to narrow it down is to survey people that know about food spoilage. From there on, can analyze the data by using descriptive statistic by calculating the mean, median, or mode. Comparative research. This is another example of non-experimental research design. The primary object of comparative research, also called casual comparative research, is to compare two variables in order to identify whether there exists a causative relationship between them. This kind of research usually involves two or more groups and one independent variable. For example, you want to know the effective participating in school summer programs, the cost of students, increased class participation. You identify two groups of students who enrolled in the summer program and those who did not when you collected data about their class of participation. After analyzing the data gathered, you concluded that the summer program helped the student in participating more in class. Tip: in order to identify which research design best suit for your inquiry, determine your purpose first in doing the research. Correlational data research. This is another example of a non-experimental research design. Its primary objective is to compare two variables, then identify the relationship between them. For example, you want to know if there is a relationship between the length of sleep and student productivity. You can collect data for the length of sleep by asking students about their bedtime and waking up time. For student productivity, let's say the number of activities being finished every day defines student productivity. After gathering your data, subjecting it to statistical analysis, you found out that one close the length of sleep to 8 hours. The higher the number of activities being done by student through this, you can now identify that there exists direct relationship between the length of sleep and student productivity. Quasi-experimental research mirrors experimental research, but it is not true experimental research where Causal relationship can be determined with use of dependent and independent variables. Quasi-experiments differ because the random selection of sample is not possible due to innate or ethical reason. For example, you want to know the effect of white on milk brand preference through experiment would have randomly assigned participate brands to group where they would be subjected to taste in order to know which brand they prefer. However, because height innate characteristic of a person participant cannot be randomly assigned to groups. In terms of two groups participants based on their height. Through experimental research, the primary objective through experimental research design is to identify a cause-effect relationship between the variables where the samples are randomized. One of the earliest experimental we have done is when we are trying to understand plant needs for us to find out sunlight affects the growth plants. We are asked by our teacher to create their three different setups. Set A to grow a seed we will receive an amount of sunlight. B seed with that will be replaced where sunlight emitted. C is a seed that will be placed completely in the dark. All water will be planted the same type of soil. The several days we discovered the set A grow perfectly big grow, but it went toward the source of light when set D not grow at all. View independent variables is the variable that manipulated. Dependent variable is the variable that is dependent on the independent variable and this is the value being measured. In this experimental research design, a causal relationship can be determined between the dependent variable which is growth of the plant and the dependent variable which is or the amount of soil type of soil, the amount of water. The more complex experimental research, a large sample size required so that result can be generalized to an entire population. This is done by process of sampling, where respondent for a study and randomly selected from a population. Guide just by reading the research paper abstract, you can get an understanding of the nature of the study object. The conclusion that attempts to generalize a phenomenon or relationship can be immediately point us to quantitative research. Another clue that we can observe is the presence of different statistical values such as the p-value or the Greek letter rho that indicates a correlation or descriptive statistics median and more mode. If the variable is discrete, then it can be quantified. Practical research introduction to quantitative research. Practical research I introduced you to the two main classification of research method, quantitative and qualitative. You have learned that qualitative research is more of describing phenomenon in our narrative, hence that the data collected can be in the form of words, images, or transcript taken from small, not generalized to the population. Choosing a small sample size make room or in-depth data collection interpretation. In this lesson you will learn about quantitative analysis or more formal objective and systematic approach of to obtaining answer to a question or problem of the study. What I need to know, but vital to the conduct of quantitative research project is the deep understanding of its characteristics, which you know its strength and different classification. We will be able to identify what kind of question you should ask and what approach is most suited to find answer to this question. The identification of its weaknesses, on the other hand, aids in recognizing the question or topics that are inappropriate of this course. At the end of this lesson, you will have good grasp of a quantitative research that will prepare you in crafting a good research study or instrumental to building lifelong skill. Advantage of quantitative research. The following advantage of quantitative research or its strength. Number one, very objective. 2. Numerical and quantitative data can be used to predict outcomes. 3. Findings are generable to the population. 4. There are conclusive establishment, cause and effect. 5. Fast and easy data analysis using statistical software. 6. Fast and easy data gathering. 7. Quantitative research can be replicated to repeated. 8. Validity and reliability can be established. Disadvantage of quantitative research. Following are the disadvantage of quantitative research or its weaknesses. Number 1. It lacks the necessary data to explore a problem or concept in depth. 2. It does not provide comprehensive explanation of human experiences. 3. Some information cannot be described by numerical data such as feelings and beliefs, for the research design is rigid and not very flexible. 5. The participants are limited to choose only from the given responses. 6. The respondent may tend to provide inaccurate responses. 7. A large sample size makes data collection more costly. Kind of quantitative research. Descriptive design is used to describe a particular phenomenon by observing it as it occurs in nature. There is no experimental manipulation, and the researcher does not start with a hypothesis. The goal of descriptive research is only to describe the person or object of the study. An example of descriptive research design is the determination of the different kind of physical activities and how often high school students do it during the quarantine. The correlation design identifies the relationship between variables. Data is collected by observation since it does consider the cause and effect. Or example, the relationship between the amount of physical activity done and student academic achievement. Exposed factor design is used to investigate possible relationship between previous events and present condition. A quasi-experimental design is used to establish the cause-and-effect relationship of variables. Although it resembles the experimental design, the quasi-experimental has lesser validity due to the absence of random selection and assignment of subjects. Experimental design, like quasi-experimental, is used to establish the cause and effect relationship of two more variables. This design provides a more conclusive result because it causes random assignment of subject and experimental manipulation. For example, a comparison of the effects of various blended learning to the reading comprehension of elementary pupils.